Try
Now it's
again.
recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible. Welcome back to Growing with the Stars for part two of the rising signs. We have clearly had a costume change. Some of us have actually gotten some vitamin D. It is not me, Katie. I'm a traditional astrologer if you've just met, and this is Kat.
And I'm here with my cranky cat. She's joining us today for our podcast. She's been very clingy since I got back home. So if you see her pop up, she says hello.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's Katie, cat, and cat. We'll
Yeah.
see if there's any other felines on your end or my end that may or may
Yeah.
not decide to be
Oh,
part
I hope
of the podcast
Stellan
today.
does come join us.
We'll see what happens. He's right now very asleep. We'll see how it goes. But we are talking about rising signs. Just as a little quick reminder, if you want the full in depth, go see part one of the rising signs. But the rising sign is well, it's a rising sign or the ascendant, and this is the sign that would be rising over the eastern horizon the moment you were born. And in some ways, in traditional astrology, this is the most personal part of the chart that speaks to the me, myself, and I that we think about today as sort of ourselves, as well as sort of our body and appearance can often come up here too. But we're going to talk a little bit more about Libra through Pisces today and kind of giving you some qualifying questions to sort of process, maybe have a better understanding of your rising sign and ways to work with it and navigating the crazy world that we are in. All right, let's start with Libra rising. These are cardinal air folks and they're ruled by Venus. So already these three things tell us quite a bit, right? They're going to be starting a lot of things. Cardinal signs, right, are initiating seasons. And so Libra season starts with the fall equinox. And that's when the light, right, is balanced and is then diminishing, right? We go into the beauty of winter, starting towards it anyway. Um, and so, this quality, as well as their sign being the scales, we see a lot of desire for balance. How do we create equilibrium? What is equilibrium? And they can be somewhat indecisive in that real effort at trying to make that balance. Once again, this really depends on where your Venus is because Venus is the ruler of Libra. And so, right, if you're a Libra rising with Venus and Scorpio, this is going to be very different than if you're a Libra rising with Venus in Cancer. No shade to any of them, but they're just different. Um, they are also, I find that Libra, people with big Libra placements and Libra risings especially have a love of like aesthetics and like visuals for communication, right? So how is it that an outfit portrays an idea that you want to sort of get across to somebody? Or how is it that visuals are a form of communication? We get this sort of Venus adornment aspect, but with the air of like the intellect and communication. And so they're often using colors, fashion, how they address their, like how they adorn themselves as a way of sort of communicating things to folks, which is really making me think of mood rings as a kid. Um, which I don't know, maybe that was just a 90s kid thing, but the mood ring that would change color depending on your body temperature. And really, when I'm talking with these folks, the thing I like to kind of bring up, if you are a Libra rising and you're thinking about balance and harmony, these things really matter to you. It's like, okay, well, what is the harmony for? Who are you in trying to make the balance for? Right? Is it really important to get along with that person? Why? And so kind of deconstructing a little bit beyond just like everything should be peaceful, but it's like, why should it be that way? And what is that piece sort of moving you towards? Is it towards connection and cohesion with people that you love and care about? Or is it just to like not make waves with people that you don't give a shit about? Can really change your perspective on that. Because sometimes harmony for the sake of harmony is kind of useless and can also be really detrimental for like having healthy conflict that you might need to actually stay in a relationship with folks. Those are some of my thoughts on Libra as as we have a gorgeous cat and her tail trying to remind us that balance and harmony is not so important.
Yeah, she's not really concerned with harmony. She's concerned with butt in my face right now and, you know, pets and all that. So, but I do love a good mood ring. I loved the mood nail polish. Super good.
Ooh, I
Super
missed
fun.
that train.
Yeah. Got a credit, I think it was like what, the 1960s or 70s for the OG mood jewelry.
It's true. We gotta
Yeah.
we gotta thank our forefathers. Without them, forefathers, foreparents, for bringing us to
Yeah.
this Technicolor day. As far as intense and not caring about social norms, that can really describe Scorpio and the Scorpio risings. If Libra is really good about balance and harmony, Scorpio is like, but is it emotionally real? And this really comes from Scorpio being a fixed water sign, and it is ruled by Mars traditionally. And so it does have this intensity. It does have a desire to go really deep and to want what's authentic and real. What's really interesting about Scorpio season too is it often in the Northern Hemisphere is this period around decay. It's this period where we see a lot of like fall rituals that have to do with the dead and the dying. We think of Dia de los Muertos, there's Halloween, and there's a few other things that often kind of begin Scorpio season. Um, and these sort of rituals highlight like we're in the middle of the sort of decay of the crops or of the decay of the earth before winter comes. And what that have to do with like Scorpio's emotional sort of intensity is that like it's willing to handle the truth of difficult things, right? It would much rather Scorpio risings would much rather acknowledge something difficult than pretend it's not there. However, their desire to see what is real and to get a layer deeper. I love you all. I say this with much love, but they can tend to fall into conspiracy theories or paranoia if they keep thinking that there's something a layer deeper. They're incredibly loyal. They are, they're the original ride or dies. But don't fuck with their people or they will come for you. They are the masters of the revenge game. And so when I'm working with Scorpio risings, a lot of it's like, okay, like what is what is the emotional thing that really helps you connect? And also like how can you sometimes see like sometimes small talk actually allows other people to open up and be ready to go emotionally deep with you, right? Like how do you recognize your version of being able to go deep and the speed at which you're able to do that is very different than like other folks. How can the superficial be helpful? And what's really emotionally motivating for you? If, Libra has much more of an intellectual motivation, it's very air, it's going to be more in the head. Scorpio is going to have much more of that emotional resonance. And if you don't care about it, you're not going to do it. That's just the total bluntness. Scorpio and most of the water signs. If your heart's not in it, you don't try. And so how can your heart be in the thing that you're trying to do? When is it when is it that that matters? Just a
This is
million questions. Sagittarius risings, right? They're mutable fire and they're Jupiter ruled. So there is a sort of warmth and emotion to them, right? They're going to take up a lot of space because Jupiter is the second biggest thing in our solar system after the sun. And they can use charisma as both connection and a mask. I don't love using mask as a term with the rising signs. There's a lot of people that are going to say that. Your rising sign is not just like inherently just a mask that hides you. It says a lot about you, but different rising signs will use different kinds of masking techniques to sort of hide the self.
Well, and I mean, I think too, in thinking about masking, it's not always about hiding who you are. Sometimes putting on a mask is bringing parts of yourself to the front. I also think about the way in which masks have been used for freedom in the things of like Carnival and like things
Yeah.
like that, where people don't know who you are. And so you can just do whatever you want, you know?
That's a beautiful way to put it because I do think that they sort of lean on the charisma and they'll lean on sort of the fun and the jovial nature, the sort of laughter piece to have a good time, to kind of hide maybe the more vulnerable pieces. And the way that Scorpio sometimes can weaponize or really come out hard with like being tough and difficult and different and sort of dark. It's not that there isn't tenderness to either of them, but they're going to come out with sort of either are they coming out with sort of the martial claw or the Jupiter laughter, as their way of sort of softening or kind of protecting themselves from folks. Um, I personally find Sagittarius risings very charismatic. I'm a fifth house Sagittarius moon. They're kind of my catnip, but that's me. They are like, they're a mutable fire sign. So there's a lot of charisma. They're very warm. They're very adaptable. But there is still this real hunger and desire for meaning, right? It is ruled by Jupiter. So there is this sort of desire for grand, overarching meaning and truth. They can get sanctimonious, right? They're going to sit on their soapbox and like want to be right about something. And if they're not careful, because they can lack the details, they're so focused on fitting things into a framework that they won't necessarily recognize when the framework is broken.
If our politicians are.
Yeah. And the United States is a Sagittarius rising chart, so we are very susceptible.
Did I really pick up on that? That's so funny.
I mean, there are quite a few. Yeah, I mean, Sagittarius and Cancer are sort of some of the big signs for the United States, and we can get into that. It's a whole other thing. But the Sibley chart, which is one of the main charts people use for the United States, there's a lot of questions about when exactly the Declaration of Independence was signed, what time. But the Sibley chart is a very commonly used one. It's very resonant, and that would be a Sagittarius rising chart, um, with a Virgo midheaven and just like a ton of planets in Cancer.
That's actually crazy. You just said that, and I was like, wow, it's just
Yeah.
kind of like our country. And it's like, oh, astrology is really freaking real. Holy crap.
It's kind of like this thing that we've been doing for 2000 plus years is where they're working. But yeah,
Just imagine.
but Sagittarius risings, mutable fire sign, ruled by Jupiter. There's a lot about charisma, wanting meaning. There's also just Sagittarius has a real wanderlust. It is a sign that's like the archer, and also it's a centaur. And so there's just great sort of reach that they have. Can be kind of restless and a desire to like explore things, go foreign places, like travel tends to come up with these folks. And there's just a real desire to learn and just be very curious. The student and the teacher come up for both of them.
I'm just laughing because you're just like, oh, a desire to go places. You mean like colonize?
I mean, it is funny that you say that because, yeah, like the real colonization starts to take off during Pluto and Sagittarius, right? Pluto often highlights the decay, the shadow of a sign, its sort of issues. We see, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the like 1500s, Pluto's in
You're
Sagittarius.
blowing my mind right now. And I've
I
studied
mean,
history. I just haven't studied astrologically aside, aside, like next to it. So like,
I go down weird rabbit holes. So I went down one when I was looking up, like, okay, when were the first sugar plantations? Because that was a major moment in colonization. It's a major moment of extraction. And if you look at like very traditional, like early texts, Jupiter's often associated with sugar. And so I was looking at like the first sugar plantations of like the very early 1500s in like what's now the Caribbean, I think. It's like 1508. And sure enough, like Pluto was in Sagittarius. And right, it's a Jupiter ruled sign. So you get the sugar connotations and you get Pluto, which is the extraction of wealth, the decay, sort of the real kind of scare that we get to of a sign. It sort of shows you the monster of that sign. And so, yeah, colonization can be a sign of that, sort of a forced philosophy on other people, sort of the forced conversion of folks can really come up. And like sugar being this major economic force in the 1500s and like beyond, like we start to see the mass production of sugar and access to this food, this Jupiter food that was once really rare. And really, I mean, it still is really important, but like literally it changed cuisine in Europe forever because we suddenly had access to it in the way they've never had before.
that is like absolutely, this is a whole series in itself. We should totally delve into at some point.
Yeah.
That leads me
Yeah.
to wondering if, Sagittarius risings have like a killer sweet tooth or not. You know what I mean?
I'm sure some of them do. I mean, I have a bit of a sweet tooth and I have the moon in Sagittarius, so there's probably some other factors to kind of bring into it, just like the moon, the rising sign, and where Jupiter is, some of those things. Um, but yeah, like Sagittarius can be a lot of fun. can be really expansive, but it does have that shadow side of forcing ideas on people. Every every sign has its shadows.
Listen,
Um,
as a Pisces rising, we're getting there. We'll get to
yeah,
shadow.
we'll get to Pisces. Forcing its ideas on people, kind of, forcing worldviews, right? We can also see like um an inability to take in data that disagrees with it, right? The sanctimoniousness of it can come up. And there's probably some others, but I think we've done a good job of like saying like I love Sagittarius and y'all are very, very fun. And also like, not perfect. And if you're working on this for yourself, is like, hey, what are the values? What is meaningful to you? And when do you need to question your worldview? And how can allowing moments of contradiction or like the data and the details actually help you have more meaning and have better values over time? Like, how can you allow yourself to question things for yourself, right? Sometimes the blind faith, right? Jupiter is a lot about faith and vision. I think having a little bit of doubt, having a little bit of that Mercury, the details, can be really helpful just to kind of catch yourself before you wreck yourself. You know what I mean?
That that seems fair. That seems fair. And especially like, okay, so we're moving like I think from these like Jupiter ruled Sagittarians into like these Capricorns who are like Saturn ruled and tend to be like I think a little more hard on themselves just in
Yeah.
general in like any area I feel like where people have Capricorn placements, it just seems like that's where they really like to hammer into themselves, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean Capricorn, and it's hard too because one of the things, like speaking of Pluto, the United States has Pluto and Capricorn, and so there's a lot of Capricorn that I think gets a little bit corrupted within the United States, especially since we just finished the Pluto return for the United States. So Capricorn is a cardinal Earth sign ruled by Saturn. Um, Everybody loves to talk about it as like the boss babe or the like capitalist boss, and I'm like, they're really missing a lot with Saturn. You're really missing a lot with Capricorn if you're just thinking like, gotta get the bag. Because these folks are often really understanding like this is the beginning of winter. We have a long road ahead before we can even start planting, let alone growing new food. And so they're thinking about survival. They're thinking about the harshness of existence on a very practical level, right? And so there's a real question of survival and lineage, right? What have we done historically that helped us get to wherever we're going next? Tradition is just a really key piece to Saturn. And so these folks, yeah, are going to care about the bag in the sense that, like, we got to fucking pay bills. We live in a system that can be harsh and can be unforgiving. Um, and I think where it's really beautiful can be where we see a sort of like revitalizing traditions or DIY practices that are like, how do we like it gets a little unfortunate with like some of the homesteading tradwife stuff, but like bringing back like a reexamination of what it means to like have your own chickens, right? Or what does it mean to like grow some of your own food? Like a real tangible sort of relationship to earth and relationship to time in a very practical way. I often find Capricorn risings are really into antiques and like historical family pieces because there's a real understanding and connection through the material and how material things could be such a huge part of our lives. Um, I really need to look at my grandparents feel very Capricorn to me. That's like, elders and Saturn really come up, but like their house, my grandfather they tore they built their house where my grandfather's birthplace, and they used beams, original wood beams from his birth home. When they took it down, they kept some of the beams, and those beams are now in the house as like exposed beams that you can sort of see between the first and second floor. And so there's this use and understanding of the material history and how we kind of connect to it that I think Capricorn really understands and values, and in some ways can be like kind of, it's not revolutionary, but really powerful in a period where everything is disposable. And they're like, no. Maybe it's not. Now, the thing I will say for these folks, right, is that sometimes they're so obsessed with tradition that they're not like, what is the tradition that you're keeping? What is this? What is it? What is valuable about that tradition? When is it important to break away from it? Right. And those are hard questions. It's not always for me to answer, but it's like, okay, sure, maybe your whole family had got married in this place and there's a family tradition about it. But like when you want to get married there, you're going to have major allergy issues because of your allergic reaction to something. Is that tradition more important than your discomfort or your like physical health? That can be a thing, right? There are traditions that it's okay to evolve and move over time, and you can still maintain a legacy. It doesn't always have to be a one-to-one, right? And so that sort of is a thing I'll often bring up, which is like, what are the traditions that are really important and valuable, and why are they valuable to you? And what's the reasoning? What's the intention behind maintaining them?
There was a story online that you just reminded me of, and it was this lady whose family always made the roast in two separate pans every year for Christmas. And they were like, we don't know why, we just do it. And one year they, I think, asked the grandma or something, and she was like, oh, I just didn't have a pan big enough to fit the roast, so I just always did it in two separate pans. And so, like, it was traditional, but it was traditional because it was necessity, right?
Yeah. And I think another version of that is like, okay, like what does it mean to save for a rainy day? Right. And so I think you can get into a point where you're so fearful that you hoard, now granted, it is a rough time economically. Let's just say that you have a good paying job, you can pay your bills. Like I'm just this is the assumption in this case. Um, you're not letting yourself ever eat out. You're not letting yourself ever go get a cup of coffee because you're just in this place where you really feel like you need to save everything. And I think then the question is okay, like what are you saving for? Is this really realistic for you? Like are you also living in the present at all? Like I'm not saying blow all your money and go to Vegas, but like sometimes we can get so emotionally in a place of lack, especially with big Capricorn placements, that it can take a moment to be like, okay, like let me just, I have my rainy day fund. Am I doing my retirement stuff if I can, right? Am I paying my bills? Like, okay, what does that really look like if I'm doing all of these things? And then maybe there is money left over. Maybe there is something that I want to be able to do nice for myself. Um, I think that there can be some somewhere between like the harshness of the beginning of winter and like the full on, it's the middle of summer, winter's never going to come and I'm completely fine. Um, that's not everybody, and it really depends once again on your Saturn, on your chart, but it's just like a gentleness that I like to kind of remind these folks because they can be, yeah, they can be incredibly hard on themselves about it. And that's just not, you can't live there.
It's okay to pull out the bottle of wine that you're saving, for a special occasion. If
Yeah.
if your brain is like, I'm saving this for a special occasion, and you sit there and you think about what the special occasion would be, and you can't think of something that's special enough, open the wine.
Yeah.
If you're like a birth, a baptism, of this, of that, then, obviously, then that's you. But if you're sitting there going, I'm not sure what day that will ever be, that will mean enough to me for this, right? Like sometimes I think we get in that we'll never have, a good bottle of wine for this event again, right? If I open this bottle of wine. Well, we may not have that bottle of wine, but I don't think anybody's going to deny that that $2 chuck is just good enough to celebrate the celebration. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, it's
exactly.
okay. And if you're dealing with people, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, my grandpa drinks a lot of wine. That's it. From the $2 chuck all the way up, you spending too much money. You spending too much money.
Yeah, there's lots of great wine that is very affordable. And
But as an example, it's
yeah,
a good example.
live your life. Live your life a little bit. Now, the next Saturn ruled sign is a little different. There still has the harshness of Saturn, but Aquarius is a fixed air sign. If Capricorn Saturn is really tradition based, Aquarius Saturn is much more of an outsider. It's much more interested in humanity from a distance. They're very philosophical and they're curious about the unknown. It has much more of Saturn has a lot of outsider aspects to it, sort of the downtrodden, the laborer. Aquarius really picks up on that more so in a way than Capricorn does, which I find very interesting personally. Aquarius placements, especially, don't like to be the center of attention. They want to have sight on things. They want to be able to see the vista. And if you think about a stage and having the light on you, you're blind to what's going on in the crowd. And that's something that makes them very uncomfortable. Um, they they want to think about humanity from a distance. I always forget his name, but there is the philosopher who did utilitarianism. John Stuart Mill, I believe is who it is, but it might have been Jeremy Bentham. Hold on. This is one
It's
of those moments.
both.
Yeah, they both did,
Yeah,
but I'm like,
they're like co-founders. Other notable utilitarian thinkers are Singer, but he was more animal rights and global poverty. Yeah. Looks like Jeremy Bentham was in 1748. So
yeah.
that would have been your primary. This is where I
Yeah, Jeremy Bentham has major Aquarius vibes. I love that I'm like looking him up and it's like a French chart. And I'm like, of course it is. So Jeremy Bentham, one of the founding thinkers of utilitarianism, Sun, Mercury, North Node, Uranus, and Jupiter, all in Aquarius.
so he's
Um,
playing in there.
Aquarius, right, thinks about humans at a scale. There is this sort of distance from humanity, but also like an idea and wanting to structure and think about how we can do things differently. They're not, Aquarius risings typically are not super touchy-feely, especially depending on like their other placements. These are folks that are very interested in people, but are going to maybe take like more background roles. They're going to be the people that are really good at like behind the scenes work. It's where they're very happy doing that stuff. They're very intellectual, right? It's a very rigorous Saturn ruled um, sign. They're not, but they're going to be, they're thinking in scales of humanity and time. They're going to be thinking of like, they're like, well, what is it like if humanity has spread out along the galaxy for 5,000 years? Type of what ifs. Like, how do you write a story that is about eons versus days? They're the people that are going to be thinking like that. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, what about this one person? Like, I don't care about one person. I care about 5,000 people. And so it can kind of get very meta very quickly, which isn't, it's not so good. It's not bad, but we sort of see that. They're often very forward thinking because they're always curious about what's at the margins, what's out there, what's next, right? It's interesting that you talked about like that theater light and that sort of margin between, because that is the area that they're often most interested in is like what sort of is not being caught or what sort of is happening elsewhere that like maybe isn't being seen. They're they're fascinating to me as a Leo rising, but that is my seventh whole sign house of other. You
It's so
can't.
funny because I can just see an Aquarius being like in a show and looking in between to see as they're acting on the stage to see what the audience is reacting at. And like it just seems so fitting with everything that you said, just to see like how's this being taken? How can I make this performance more for the people, blah blah blah. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah. And Leo, on the other hand, is very much like I'm being recognized. Here is the light. I am in the light. I am seen. I am acknowledged. And there's the like the basking in the moment.
yeah, I think with
Neither,
Leo it's more like the light is on and I'm performing and then the light turns off and I have to face the reality and I'm like, oh, I was performing.
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, so, Aquarius cares about you. If there's anything, but maybe they don't care about you in the way that you're used to care being. Um, and the thing I like to remind these folks is like, okay, is the next thing always out there? And when is it that you actually do need to take up space? There is, I think, a kind of leadership and power really being called up right now with Pluto and Aquarius that's like traditional forms of leadership, traditional ways of like who we center is being challenged. And we're going to need lots of kinds of leaders, lots of kinds of people to take up space. And if anything, Aquarius risings, people embodying this sort of era are going to matter in a really important way because you have an ability to acknowledge, to see the things that like have often been overlooked. Uh, you're a key part of the puzzle.
The ability to like see what's happening while the action's happening, but also see forward into the future and how that might affect the outcome that you want.
Absolutely. And like, how do we rethink our systems? Right? What are the systems of like how we organize and structure and like what do we really need next? And what do we need to try and experiment on?
So like
And
going with like the play thing, like is Aquarius kind of like a I'll change the play to fit the audience as I go based on the responses from the audience for the long term? Or is it more like I'm thinking about the long term, but also gauging the responses to me in between the margins of the lights and the dark?
the metaphor that I often think about is Leo wants to take up the stage and perform. And Aquarius is often like, behind, stage right or stage left behind, watching everything play out and thinking about how do we need to tweak the lights? How do we need to think about the set format? How is all of this sort of structurally as a play playing out?
So
And
Aquarius is a techie, is what you're telling me.
yeah,
So, okay.
they, yeah. Um, and also like how is it that the very idea of a theater is structurally set up for these people to interact, right? Like the difference between a traditional theater and a box theater, like the black box style or other styles of theater. Like they would be thinking about like the experience of experiencing a play.
I love
Um,
that. It's not the
yeah,
play itself, but the experience of the experience.
yeah. And how is it like they're the kinds of folk that be like, well, how is it that the audience is part of the show and how is the show part of the audience and like playing with the very structures of a play?
That's
And
so
getting that sort of weird where you're like the audience is the play and the play is the audience and actually like the thing that you're a part of is actually this one piece and you can only ever experience it this way and then we have to do this piece over here and like I'm kind of blabbering at this point but yeah it can
That's
get
okay. I
very
just find
meta.
Aquarius fascinating. I have my North Node placement in 12th house Aquarius, right? And so I'm just like, I know nothing. That's it. That's all I know. I know nothing about it except for that. That's all I know about
Yeah.
Aquarius, and that it's supposed to be a little like kind of goofy, but also fun, but also really like thoughtful and also like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's one of those things that I'm like, I gotta know more about this one because this is the one that's just a fascinating sign. And it's so funny because it feels kind of homey, even though I'm
Mm,
Pisces rising, which is our next one, which is in antithesis of Jupiter ruled versus Saturn ruled. So it feels like
yeah.
almost an opposite because they come at things so differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think the correction that we'll see with Pisces, I mean, the part of the big issue with Aquarius is sort of like the issue with utilitarianism, right? Which is like, okay, like the most amount of good for the most number of people. And so if you could have a perfect society and you had to like, I don't know, leave a baby out in the wilderness once a year for the price of that, like, is that ethically worth it, right? You sort of get these sort of ethical
Yeah.
moments of like cost benefit analysis at scale can also really like ignore like an individually deeply damaging emotional experience. Like, how do you hold that tenderness? How do you hold the kind of connection? Like, they can be so distant that they sort of totally abstract humanity to a point where it's no longer feeling human, right?
Yeah, if you haven't read that book, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, that's exactly what came to mind when you said that, like
Yeah.
putting a baby in the wilderness. Ooh, that one's rough.
Yeah. And like, and that's where Pisces, right, as a mutable water sign ruled by Jupiter, really has a deep desire for connection. It's deeply emotional. It's deeply the visual I always think of is rivers running into the sea, and there's this desire to merge and blend and sort of have the sort of religious, human, ecstatic merging experience is deeply Piscean. And it's like, how do we connect with each other? How do we heal? Um, how do we like imagine and sort of dissolve the barriers that kind of bind us? Um, I love my Pisces. They can be so into transcendence that it can kind of become avoidance of reality. Um, and sometimes I'm like, I love you guys, But you said we were going to meet at 4 o'clock, and it is now 5, and now you're wondering why I'm not at the place because I waited half an hour and texted you, and like I'm sorry. I know you said time is a construct, but I got other things I must do within this construct, my dude.
Oh, bless. I don't know what I have in my chart that offsets that because I got the anxiety about that one. But when it's just me, yeah, time is a construct. I'm going to tell you right now, there is no, like, what time is it? Who knows? The day is a beautiful day. It's sunshine, there's birds. It must be morning.
And that's yeah, and that's totally fine. And I think like at its best, it's like there's this desire to connect and to heal. Um, and can really be so imaginative and fantastical. Like we get folks with really big Pisces placements that do these great, fantastical world buildings and poetry and art. And like there's a reason Venus is exalted in Pisces. There's like a lot of the sort of high romantic art of like ecstatic unions. And like I think of Sufism and sort of like the sort of ecstatic poetry of Hafiz. Like there's like gorgeous pieces that sort of, I think, feel very Piscean to me. Um, but like it can, yeah, want to avoid reality, or it can use and this is a big caveat because lots of people have these issues. Big Pisces placements can sometimes also have the issue of like using drugs and alcohol to escape, right? Um, but like for Pisces risings, there's just like connection is such a big important piece. An emotional connection is really the place where it happens. And for these folks, I always like to kind of remind them there's like our desire for relationships. There's this interesting tension of this need to merge and also this need to separate and differentiate. And that both are part of the dance, and that we can't live in one or the other entirely. But like, how do you have a container that can like hold yourself and have space for yourself will then allow you to have more merging and better ability to show up for others too in the way that you really want.
This is like hilariously my whole struggle in the last year. I just went through my 12th house year. So we're back in my first house year. Pisces is my rising sign. So here we are floating, right? Okay. And this is just like my whole thing. Like the last couple months have been like, how do I balance this newfound like astrology type situation with my like brain that's really skeptical, right? Like I've been in this capitalist society for a really, really long time. I've just been really grinding myself down, right? Like the world is very this, very that. How do I not like lose myself on one side or the other? How do I find that balance in between? And
Mm,
also just struggling with like the things that used to be a release, right? Or relaxation amongst like the chaos can turn into, because of the nature of Pisces, can turn into that sort of prison of like, not even like, of like, a sort of like I would call it a prison of addiction that would feel like,
mm,
I don't want to, do go outside or whatever because it's just easier to be inside, and that was really just a release to be on my own, or like I for a long time, so like as a silly example, like when I was really sick, couldn't do anything, started playing bingo. Started playing bingo. Now, like before I left for my trip, well, no, it was waning before I left for my trip a little bit. But like a little before that, I was a little too much playing a little too much bingo. Okay, let's put it that way. I was playing a little too much bingo. And so I stopped. Right. But I've always had that like, nope, we're seeing a problem, we're gonna, which probably comes from somewhere else. I'm sure people,
yeah.
struggle a little more with that. But like I do see that desire to like want to disappear inside the things you're doing, or like, just kind of float away. And like the desire for transcendence too was something. That desire for transcendence, the desire to just like know and like learn and just want to like that can become its own addiction. Like I
Yeah.
want to fall into this like that's like going one way or the other, falling into like this, for lack of a better like way to process it, divine or like spiritual side. I just want to fall into it and leave myself in it and just let go and let all that happen and just never ever really concern myself with the real physical, not real, but
Yeah.
physical solid things I can touch, things I can see, things I can do, it's all, you know, it has to be destined, fated, this and that. It's so easy to want to just like lean into it. And I think some of that comes from it's a little easier,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
but also like it's just so it's interesting too because like it's just I see like there's those aspects, but then also yeah, there is that, expansive in that Jupiterian way, imaginative part of me that is like right now it's a little stuck in there. But there's definitely I connect with a lot of that, but like yeah, that escaping and avoiding but framing it as attempting to connect is an interesting thing that happens and it's so easy to fall into. Like I will sometimes be like, I'm fine. Tell me about your day. I want to know all about you. Tell me all about you. I don't have any problems going on whatsoever, but yeah, I'm struggling, right? You know what I mean? Like trying to connect, but also just avoiding myself in that too.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like for if you're really kind of struggling, I think that's where like the earthiness and grounding can be really helpful as a practice. Like, not that you have to like live entirely in your body. It's not something I do super well with my giant air stellium, but like okay, like what does it mean to like if you're really finding yourself avoiding things, like what does a body scan look like once a day where you just sort of in your mind's eye like kind of go down your body and acknowledge things, or you do like a little moment of awareness where you name three things you can see, three things you can hear, three things that you can sort of set, like just kind of going through the senses and sort of because I think what's happening, right, is when we think about it, is like there is connection and there is merging and there is the ecstatic, which is beautiful. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And then also like how do you sort of ground it and kind of stay on earth to allow yourself to move through things. Um, and I think those as complementary practices can be really good, right? I think there's a reason why the water and earth signs have such beautiful kind of aspects to each other. And that can be, I think, really, really beneficial for the Pisces risings. Literally in my notes, it's like, hey, when are you trying to connect and when are you escaping and avoiding? Like, and how might grounding be really supportive for you? Um, even if it's just putting your feet in the grass for a few seconds.
Listen, if you just walk outside and walk away from your phone and the computer for 5 minutes a day, it makes a huge difference. One of the things I was struggling with so hard before I quit social media altogether was like, I feel so trapped in my head. I don't feel attached
Mhm.
to this world at all. Like, I feel freaking weird. And like I struggled with it still on and off, and I'm still struggling with it on and off, but I
Yeah.
definitely feel more grounded now. And what I did was I was forcing myself to go sit outside and just sit outside and listen and observe and watch the things around me and be present in the moment. And that's so
Yeah.
hard. Listen, in this day and age,
Yeah.
that is hard. Like the fact, like we are all day, our brains are just going, 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 going. And like I mean, this is almost ideal for me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're just getting information all the time. What are you talking about? This is fantastic. You mean I don't have to process my feelings? This is great. You know what I'm saying? Like, so having to go outside and sit with myself for 5 minutes, even if I'm bored, forcing myself into boredom, which can, it makes your brain work. So if you're feeling that like blah, that like I'm floating away, I don't know what to do. I really wish I had something to hold on to. Just go outside and shoot. If
Yeah.
you can't detach from your phone for that long yet, start by just downloading the Merlin app. Go outside, turn it on, let it listen to the birds and identify the birds. So then that way you have something that you're like looking at, but it's not social media.
Mm.
Because I'm telling you right now, like there is nothing that will get like my Pisces rising ass fucked up more than social media. And I'm telling you, because I'll scroll and I'll scroll and I'll scroll, and it's
Yeah.
just endless information, endless like videos, doom, 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 or like positive, positive. You know what I mean? It's too much. It's so much, and you'll just float in it
Yeah.
forever. You'll never get away from it.
Yeah, I think definitely figuring out unplugging is something that I'm working on as well. And I think finding a balance is really important. It's also why I do yoga, which is like it sort of forces you to like focus on your breathing for like half an hour. Um, and it is incredible how, my anxiety level can go from like a here to a here.
I think just
Um,
that forced focus too, especially like even
yeah.
looking, I think you said you're a Sagittarius rising. So we're both,
I'm a Leo
you're a
rising.
Leo rising. Okay, I was gonna say, so we're both a little fun, but even still, like regardless, your sun rolled, so
Yeah, and Mercury's doing
gotta
a
get
lot of work and it's so
those
it
sun
loves,
salutations.
yeah, the Mercury loves the information, always wants more of it. We'll see how Uranus going over my sun, how things work out, how things shift and change with technology. We'll see how it goes. But those are all the rising signs. And just hopefully this helps you think about how you're going through the world, what really matters and draws to you, and also can really help you go a layer deeper. Looking at the planet that rules your rising sign is a really good way to kind of get a better sense of your flavor of your rising sign kind of astrology and can really help you start to identify like, oh, there's something that's hitting my like, I don't know, I'm a Pisces rising and like something's gonna hit my natal Jupiter. I should watch that, right? Um, and yeah, we'll be back next time. I think we're gonna do Mercury signs and communication style.
We'll find out what we'll do next time, and then we'll
Yeah, we'll let you know.
roll
It
on
is
with
Mercury
it.
retrograde as I talk about this, so maybe we'll change our minds.
It's
But
possible.
yeah, thank you for joining us and please click subscribe, follow, all those things and I don't know, take it easy out there.
We'll keep working. Take care.